Just to go through some general rules and facts, not to sort of bog us down, just to make sure that you're aware that nobody can see or hear you. So if you're in your pajamas, then don't worry about it. All will be well. So you'll have a chance to ask questions at the end. So if you have some questions, then there is an option at the top if you've got the webinar open, and just to ask questions as you go through. And then what I'll do at the end is I'll go through them questions and ask them to Dan. So please feel free to add them in at any point, as many as you like. If we don't have a chance to answer all the questions during the webinar, then we'll take them offline as well. If you are members of CPDme, then the certificate for tonight will automatically be populated within your profile. So that'll happen within the next 24 hours as well. And what you'll also be available is a recording of the webinar following tonight. So if you want to sort of refresh yourself or come back to it in a few weeks' time, then there's always that option as well. So just another thing is that CPDme, if you're not a member of CPDme, then I just encourage you to have a look at the website and just see what's available. What CPDme is that it's an online website and it's also available as a mobile version. And it's really good for building, recording and maintaining your CPD. As we all know, it can be a bit tedious to try and keep hold of all of your documents in a single folder. So having paper everywhere and trying to collate it when you've got interviews or providing evidence to the HCPC, it can be a bit of a nightmare. So this tool makes it very easy to collate everything and just record learning along the way as well. So you can enter into the diary as you go through from anywhere really. So really encourage you to have a look at that. And finally, CPDme hashtag on Twitter. So if you want to comment or share some of the learning from tonight, you can also follow us on hashtag CPDme as well. So if you want to sort of follow any of the key discussion points as well, then that's really handy. Now just before I'll just check if Dan's there. Are you there, Dan?
Okay, so can everyone hear me now? So first of all, apologies. I don't know who to blame for the technical difficulties, but those of you that do know me personally know that technically I am rubbish, so it was undoubtedly me, so I do apologise. And I did promise on Twitter earlier that I'd have you, you might miss MasterChef, but you would definitely be back on for the 9 o'clock show, so I will make sure that that's happened. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Sam Smith and I'm a consultant paramedic, very grand title, for the North West Ambulance Service. And this webinar really is designed around kind of my personal feelings and reflection on clinical leadership within the NHS and within the ambulance service. So this isn't going to teach you how to be a leader. This isn't going to teach you what we do in the Northwest is the right thing to do. But what it is going to say is just discuss really my journey and the journey of the Northwest Ambulance Service, and a little bit of an insight into what I think are some of the challenges around clinical leadership within a modern ambulance service. I will say that we've had some technical difficulties. I will try and play a video halfway through this. If that doesn't work, I apologise now, but thank you very much for your lateness. So I'm showing you now just a bit of a timeline of my life within the NHS. So I joined the NHS back in 1997. Now, I'm not going to talk about me very much on this, but it is an important time frame that we're talking about here in terms of the NHS and some of the challenges that we've had. So way back in the 80s, Mrs. Thatcher decided that the NHS was very inefficient, and a few reports were done, and back then clinical leadership was around. The term wasn't, but actually the concept of it was, and the NHS was being led by and managed by clinicians, namely doctors, to be honest, back then. And as efficiencies started to be realised, they said that they needed general managers, and clinical leadership was kind of not pushed to one side, but was supported by, or supposedly supported by, general managers. And we went through that period over the 80s and the 90s of general managers being the lead management team within the NHS, really, supported by doctors, and then as times moved on, nurses, and then obviously allied health professionals. I joined in 1997, an important year for those of you that remember it. So Princess Diana sadly died in a car accident, and We also had a Labour government just starting up. Mr. Blair started in government. So I joined the NHS at a time when it was money was not great. But the early part of my career, money really became a little bit of no object, and there was lots and lots of money injected into the NHS. So improvements, lots and lots of resource increases. And I joined what was then GMAS back in 2000 as a student paramedic, IHCD. And then my journey through the NHS has been that. So around about 2007, which again is an important year, and I'll come to that in a bit. But 2007, I started in sort of real management terms, and then 2009, advanced paramedic, and 2015, obviously, consultant paramedic. But I wanted to also just very briefly show you the money bit. It was around some of the education as well. So I won't tell you the very boring story of me walking out of my A-levels. However, I came to the NHS with GCSEs. That was my only real formal qualification. And then I did an MVQ in care while I was a nursing auxiliary in an A&E department down in South Warwickshire. And then slowly but surely, I did a little bit of training, but it wasn't really until around about the 2007 mark that I started getting opportunity for what I would call academic development. So diploma followed by a BSc. And in 2007 is when we really in the NHS started to talk about really developing us as a profession. So there'd been talk about it, but money wasn't really coming through. But in 2007, I personally saw a real change in terms of how paramedics were thought of, what we were thought about doing. Training really changed, and we started to see a real difference. So right up until 2007, really, the only formal qualifications I had were GCSEs and NVQs. So as you remember those, they were tick box things where you had to fill out a load of forms and you got a load of ticks. And once you got a load of ticks, you got an MVQ out of it. Then in 2006, 2007, we really started to see that change, and education really started to change, in my opinion, for the better. And you'll notice also my BSc was really concerned with contemporary health practice. I know there are a few of you online tonight that also did that similar degree. And I picked modules in that weren't about clinical practice. I knew where I wanted to go by that point. I knew that we were heading towards clinical leadership structure. We're heading towards advanced practice. And so I decided that I wanted to really study a little bit more about leadership and change management and practice development and that sort of thing. So my contemporary health practice degree was very much a sort of theory-based around the management and leadership styles. These 2 hours of turning points for me, and again, I just wanted to point out, 2002, I was an IHCD 8-week training course, paramedic, and when I looked up, and it was just looking up, because back then, really, paramedics didn't go anywhere other than up within their own ambulance service or maybe neighbouring ambulance services. I didn't see a lot that really appealed to me. If you look across the top of the timelines there was a clinical practice trainer, which in effect was on the road, which I enjoyed, working with new staff, which I enjoyed, working with older staff, which I enjoyed, but there wasn't much of development. The next step from that was working in a classroom, never really seeing a patient unless you did overtime at the weekend. There wasn't much to look up to and think, gosh, I want to be that. Then in 2007, when we really started in the NHS talking about this clinical leadership stuff, when I looked up, there were things that I thought about I might want to start to do. So advanced practice being one of them, clinical leadership, specialist roles started to come about. But also in 2007, I didn't have to just look up. I could look outwards, and we started to see the real green shoots of paramedics working in other areas of the NHS or other private practice. And that was just astounding for most paramedics that trained before then, because actually there was very little in terms of development for us. So I've spent a bit of time on that slide, but I think it's important that we understand where we've come from. This is NWAS. I'm not going to labour the point. This is our clinical structure. Around that, that's clearly not the only structure. Around that, we have an operational structure as well, and then we also have some specialist roles. But in terms of clinical leadership, that is NWAS. So we have urgent care staff, EMTs, through to our senior paramedic team leaders who look after hopefully a ratio of 1 to 12. Advanced paramedics who should be looking after a smaller group of senior paramedics, so they should be looking after around about 10 senior paramedics. And then the area consultant paramedic is where I sit, looking after around 13, 14 advanced paramedics, alongside other responsibilities and things. So that's our structure. And then in NWAS, we have a chief paramedic as well, so a head of profession, who really job is obviously director level, boardroom level, but also his role is to look after the likes of me and make sure I'm doing my job okay and leading. And this fits in with the College of Paramedics framework. You've probably all seen this, most people that are on. I mean, it fits in around that. The only thing that I would say around this is that the framework talks about clinical practice strain and management strain, and then the research strain. Well, actually, it is a circle, and probably if I think about really what I do on a daily basis, today I might be able to fit this into lecturing and education. Tomorrow, everything that I do may be around clinical practice. So we're very much, as a clinical leadership structure, not just going down one strand, very much looking at the whole thing. We've been very clear in NWAS that we think academic and education, not just training, but education of our staff is really important. And it's something that I have seen grow and grow and grow. And yes, right now, as with all parts of the NHS and public sector, there is some funding issues. But over the years, we have certainly allowed, paramedic DIPHE level education. Senior paramedics will be looking at BSc, advanced paramedics are MSc educated, and then the consultants MSc and PhD. And we're very clear, this isn't about just new people joining either. And I was very pleased that NWAS, I was an IHCD paramedic, and I didn't get to my roles and then get the education. I was allowed some of this education beforehand, and any paramedic in NWAS was allowed to, fully funded, complete a DIPHE if they wanted to in higher education. And that's really important. It's about educating our staff. So leadership is what I'm talking about. Now, academics please don't tweet about me and moan. I did a Google search and I looked at images and I found these. These were some of the top images around leadership. And I did that on purpose, just to see really what was on there. What do people talk about? And you can see lots and lots of words on the screen there. Lots and lots of words about the person, the leader, maybe not so much about the people being led. So a few on the bottom right are talking about people and others and development, but most of it is around the sort of characteristics that we think about with leadership. But I do want to just briefly touch on that arrow. So that arrow is an interesting one for me. It shows the leader, and when we think about a leader, I guess we think about somebody at the front and followers behind. But it is a strange image, I think, for me. And whilst we might think in that way, I would prefer to see the red character sort of 3 or 4 rows back, really, because clinical leadership isn't about always being there leading from the front. Clinical leadership, for me, is about empowering all those people, the blue people in that picture, but all those people to actually know the direction they're going in, empowering them to go in the direction. And you might be there as their leader, but you might not necessarily always be at the front taking them. It's about empowerment. So for me, that picture is slightly wrong. So the guy in the red needs to be a little bit further back. We need to think about that in the context of the ambulance service, because we have some, for me, real good challenges. I can't always, apologies if you can see all this stuff suddenly screaming up onto my screen. So I can't always be there on scene. An advanced paramedic can't always be there on scene. So clinical leadership in the ambulance service is about empowerment of others. It really is about empowering people to know the direction they should be going in and supporting them in that direction rather than always being there from the front. I put this up, and it's right that I do. This is the leadership model brought to us by the Leadership Academy, and at the end of I think this presentation is being sent out, at the end of it, all the links and stuff for all of this this information is at the end of the presentation. But it's right that we do look at this. But again, this is about a model of leadership, and then how we lead through. So inspiring purpose, engaging the team. And it is good. And the Leadership Academy is a really good, rich source of information and tools to not only look at yourself, but also consider how you might use leadership in some project or change management. So it's well worth a look. However, if I was going to draw a model of clinical leadership, this would be the model for me. I think on a regular basis, most leaders within the NHS are probably doing what that little man's doing, and that's spinning plates. We are constantly in a sea of change, aren't we, in the NHS? We are constantly having to think in the morning, what is it today that I need to really deal with? And that's a good thing in some ways. It certainly trains us well in terms of leadership and management, but it does stop us from sometimes reflecting. What that guy is doing, though, is that's not his first day spinning plates, because he's doing it quite successfully. And trust me when I say, back in 2007, 2008, when I started trying to do what he's doing now, many, many, many plates were broken. I think that's the first thing we've got to think about. Leadership in the NHS is a difficult thing to achieve well. And it's a difficult thing to achieve well all the time. And what that guy's doing with his plates there is he's doing it very well because he's practiced and he's learnt, and also he's thought about it, which was the best way to do it. He's using a particular finger on one hand. It's important that we think about what it is we're going to do, both as leaders and when we are thinking about how we want to be led. The other picture is about balance, and it is a balancing act. And, you know, in a morning when I go into work, I might have a very clear day set out in front of me, but something has happened overnight, or someone's been upset or injured, or something's gone wrong overnight, and my entire day will change. But I have to balance. And it's also about my own personal balance. So the NHS is a busy place. We are all busy. Nobody working in any public sector probably at the moment is not busy. So this is about balance for me. So there is a little bit of personal sacrifice in good, strong leadership, and that has to come, unfortunately. But it is about making sure you get the balance right when leading. There's a few quotes and stuff here on this page, and again, I'm not going to read words out to you. You can read what's there. But Nicholson down at the bottom there talks about this leadership being at a local level, which is most effective, and that the simple idea is implemented by empowered individuals. Now, that was back in 2007. So if we were writing an assignment for university, that would just about to be becoming out of date. But I think that's a really, really key thing to say, that leadership at local level about empowerment. And I will continue to keep saying that this isn't about individual leaders affecting change. This is about leaders empowering everybody to affect that change. Really, really, really important. It talks about wide understanding of political and financial. I'll talk in a bit about clinical specialist roles. When we think about clinical leadership, we do sometimes get bogged down with the clinicalization of it. But it's very clear for me, and certainly for my team, that we need to really understand the politics, and we really need to understand finance, and we actually need to understand business. And it's probably a fault of mine even to this day that my business skills are not up to scratch, and it's certainly something that I've reflected on recently and will be trying to develop it over the next sort of year or two, is my business sense. Now, that might sound bizarre. We work in the NHS, we're not a business, but it is important because the world that we are in is business-like, and there are big business influences. So we do have to understand business, understand politics, and understand the wider economy, because an ambulance service doesn't just attend cardiac arrests anymore, does it? It doesn't just attend car accidents. In fact, around about 95% of our work is nothing to do with critical care. It's to do with the broader NHS requirements. So we need to understand the politics of mental health at the moment, a real key thing at the moment around funding, obviously, but also around access. We need to understand that stuff to lead well. I did another little bit of digging, and the College of Paramedics, I think, in their post-graduate work, talk about this as being the development required or the areas required for development of senior specialist, advanced and consultant paramedics. Now, I've picked out a few, and they are absolutely right in everything that they say, and they've said clearly assessment, diagnosis, discharge, referral, that sort of thing. Clinically being good, that's what our first statement says. The next one's about assessing and managing risk, and I'll be honest with you, if you'd have told me that 10 years ago, I probably wouldn't have took the path that I took. This is a massive part of my job. Clinically, just looking at what's going on, whether that's a new project, whether that's something happening clinically out on the road, and just understanding the risk, but broadening it as well. So understanding, if a paramedic's done something wrong today, is that because that paramedic did something wrong, or is that because actually the entire workforce out there will do that again tomorrow? Really assessing and understanding risk is a major part of good quality leadership. A big thing for me, critical thinking and analytical skills, and I will make that point in a bit, but decision making and clinical judgment, obviously, and managing complexity. Key things really from the college there about what clinical leadership is about. What it's not about is this. It's not about extra skills. Everybody, whatever career you're in, whatever job you're in, and I'm assuming most people on here are probably NHS and ambulance staff, but even if you're a taxi driver, I'm sure there's questions you get asked as a taxi driver that you're just bored to death of hearing. And a question that I get asked a lot, and I'm sorry if someone's asked this on the thing, I can't see at the moment, but is what extra skills, what extra bits can you do to a patient that I can't do? And I normally smile and say, well, I have a few extra skills, but actually it's not about a scalpel or an ultrasound, and it's absolutely not about what pretty stars and stripes and things I have on my shoulders. It's about leadership, actually. That's what this is about. It's about clinical leadership. I'm going to try and play you a video now. It is only a few minutes long, but I hope it works.
Great leaders do more than just tell people what to do. They inspire them to follow, not because they have to, but because they want to. We asked across NWAS what makes an inspirational leader. The response was that it's not only about what you do, but how you do it and who you are. And that was how our leadership model, Be Think Do, was born. Be Think Do is a simple guide to leading in today's world and being the type of leader our people find inspirational. At the centre of Be Think Do is an understanding of why you have chosen to work for NWAS and why you want to lead. Each of us has a duty to help deliver the strategic goals of NWAS, offering our patients safer care closer to home, providing our staff with a great place to work, and causing no harm. And we want to do this while being true to the values of NWAS. Delivering what's best for our patients and staff means first understanding how our own goals and values align with those of NWAS. As a leader, you might want to ask yourself, how do I empower my team to deliver this for patients? And how can I create a culture of caring for my team? The first step in being a leader is to be a healthy role model. Develop a protective shield by looking after your own health and well-being, and be aware of your mood and mindset to help build resilience. Abandoning your shield does not make you a hero. Instead, it can put others around you at risk. It's better to lead by example, so a resilient culture grows within your team. Let's look at how else Be Think Do can help guide you. The world we work in is becoming ever more volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous. The goalposts keep moving for all of us, and we're under financial pressure to deliver more for less. As leaders, we need to be accessible and always ready to engage with our teams. We might not have all the answers, but we can always lead with compassion and interest and help our staff cope positively with uncertainty. Our judgment and decisions directly affect those around us, so we have an obligation to think objectively. Good critical thinkers can think strategically, innovatively, and can deal with ambiguity. It's easy to get blindfolded by past experiences and past solutions, but remember all the positive changes that have come about simply from people thinking differently. Remember, your team is a reflection of yourself. People watch what you do more than they listen to what you say. So you need to be a leader who is worth emulating and demonstrate honest and ethical behaviour. Understand the type of leader you are and continually reflect on the things you do and the effects they have. There's an old Greek proverb, sometimes we must plant trees whose shade we will never sit in. As NWAS leaders, it's our job to create a confident workforce capable of taking our organisation into the future. Our role isn't to provide every solution to every problem. Instead, we help our team stand on their own 2 feet and think for themselves. We can't control everything, but we can control the way we respond and help our teams be the best they can be.
That's a really good video. We did some work in NWAS around what do our staff think make good leaders. And there's a number of key messages, but it was really about being inspired by the people around us and being able to adjust as leaders to situations and being really, really good at what we do in terms of allowing our staff to to develop and be empowered and, as leaders, make sure that we are okay, allowing our staff just to be empowered to do sometimes things that they want to do and really allow that sort of innovation of practice. And there's a bit at the end about what we're doing as leaders now. We may not see the fruits of, or we may not stand underneath the tree or in the shade of the tree from the seeds that we've sown, but what we're doing now will make a better ambulance service in 10, 15, 20 years time. And I think that is something that perhaps us and maybe other ambulance services don't do quite so well. Is actually, it's right that sometimes our leadership moves on, and we do regenerate roles. And one of the things that I get asked a lot, and actually I ask my team a lot, is who is the next me? Who is the next you? And it's absolutely right that we are constantly looking for replacement and replenishment of our staff and our leaders especially, so that we can always be that new, fresh, innovative organisation that we need to be. Again, loads of words, and this is more for you guys if you want to look back afterwards, but I am going to pick out just one or two and talk about them. So a bit of this is about values-based management and leadership, being patient and staff focused and being a role model, and something that I've come to learn sometimes through mistakes and reflecting, but that every single contact counts. Now, that might be every single contact that I have and every single contact that my staff have. So when my staff see me, sometimes they get a bit worried because they think they might be in trouble. Sometimes they think, oh, great, it's Dan. I'll ask him a question, or can we have this drug or that new innovative practice or whatever. But conversations are really precious, and they're very precious to the staff. So if you are a leader listening in or an aspiring leader, every conversation you have with staff will have an impact on them. But if you are a staff member or a leader, then actually we should be listening and learning. So when someone asks me something, I might give them an answer, and that's okay. But I will always just have a think to myself, why are they asking that? Are 20 people asking the same question? And if they are, maybe I gave the wrong answer. So listening and learning and making sure that every conversation is precious is a really key thing that I've learned over time. And behave how you need your team to behave is the correct thing to say, and that means having a laugh sometimes. So those, again, people who know me will know I'm quite happy sat in the mess room having a laugh and having the banter that we all love about the ambulance service, and that's okay because that's needed within our mess rooms. So it isn't always about absolute professional, being miserable as far as the staff see, but behave how you need your team to behave. But make sure there's a line, and also make sure that when you're on an incident, that behaviour is exactly how it should be, the most professional you possibly can be. And empowerment to the team to think themselves. I'm going to talk right at the end about what NWAS does have in terms of remote advice, but the very worst thing that we can continually do is just give out answers, because that's not empowering at all. So when I talk about these conversations, when someone asks something, and it might be an admission, I don't know the answer, But more often than not, it's why are you asking me that? What is what's driving you to want to know that? And often there is something hidden behind. The video that I couldn't show you was about Be Think Do. It's called Be Think Do because it's about you being the leader, thinking like a leader, and then doing it correctly. And this links into all of that, really. I said before that leadership's not easy, and there isn't, and there will need to be some personal sacrifice, and you will need to find that balance. But there's also a balance towards your staff, and if you are, again, an aspiring leader, you have got to think about what it is you're going to do for your staff, because being available, accessible, and approachable is absolutely key. Absolutely key. And that might mean that as you're walking out the door on a Friday, having had a really long and challenging week, and someone comes to you with a question, that you don't cut them off. Or it might mean, actually, for the balance, you have to manage that conversation as well as you can, and then say, look, I really have got to leave, but I will phone you tomorrow, or whatever it might be. But making sure that availability and accessibility is really there. And that does mean some personal sacrifice. And then realistic to what the team will be, think, and do. And that's a little bit about, I might make a decision tomorrow that might upset some staff. I need to have the intelligence, not so much my own brain, but the intelligence to understand what the staff may react to that, and what will they be, what will they think, and what will they do. Knowing that means that when you're realistic about what people will do, when you're realistic that, yes, we are all professionals, of course we are, but actually it's important about getting home on time. It's important about having meals. It's important about having equipment that works and is good. When we're realistic about what the organisation is, or what the workforce is, or what the team is, if we're realistic about it, then we can foresee what's going to happen next. Again, really important. The other thing on this is critical thinking, and this is really, 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 really important for clinical leadership. So critical thinking is about, it is your brain that you're bringing. I might have a scalpel in my bag, I might even have an ultrasound machine in my bag, but what I'm bringing is my brain. So if I do attend the scene, it is my brain and my critical thinking that I'm applying. So there's questions, and I don't have the answer to this, but there's questions around, so is it the high acuity incidents that clinical leaders should be mostly attending, or actually is it the low acuity? Because where is the risk? So the risk, immediate risk to the patient, is in high acuity, clearly, but there is a longer term risk in the lower acuity, and they are more complex and more difficult to deal with. And then we start to think about specialties. So I have in my team of 13 APs, what I would call trauma junkies, so guys that are really, really, really interested in trauma. And I have others that are a bit like me and not that interested in trauma. Now, that's okay. What I couldn't have is a team of APs that are all just interested in trauma, because the team would not function, and it wouldn't provide clinical leadership to a workforce of staff who don't all deal with trauma. Conversely, if I didn't have anybody interested in critical illness, trauma type, cardiac arrest type work, then actually we wouldn't function again, because that's where some really high risk patient groups sit within our organisation. So it is about making sure the team functions, and then within clinical leadership, not trying to be an expert at everything. So I am quite open that, I can manage cardiac arrest. I go to cardiac arrest a lot. I go to quite a lot of trauma, but it's not where my interests lie, and therefore it's not my area of expertise. So if we're getting some complex conversations outside of normal work, i.e. me looking at pathways or whatever, I have 2 or 3 advanced paramedics who work for me who are the guys that are experts within the trauma. They do all the extra reading. They do attend all the conferences around trauma, and are much better at telling me what is right, what's the right direction. So just because I do wear Consultant Paramedic on my shoulder doesn't mean that within the team I'm always the leader. Someone else may be leading me. Really, really important to remember that. We're getting towards the end now, and one of the things around leadership was about when does it happen. So first of all, on scene. So clearly someone's on scene, and I am a Consultant Paramedic when I turn up. Sometimes I will take over the scene, not always. Often it's about letting them run the scene and me just being there for advice or guidance, or taking over if I need to, or if I have to. But On-scene advice does happen, but it doesn't happen very often. There is one of me for Greater Manchester with about 1,400 staff. There are 13 advanced paramedics. Across NWAS, there are 52 advanced paramedics. So if they all, we have a 24-hour rota. They can't always be on scene. And then underneath, we have senior paramedics, of which is about 280. Again, they can't always be on scene. So the on-scene stuff is probably the place where we make least impact. Then there's remote stuff. So that's, we have a 24-hour access to senior clinical advice, and that's escalating advice. So when you first call up, you speak to normally a dispatcher who says, how can we help? What's the problem? And if they can look something up for you, then they will do. If it's clinical advice, they will pass it to a clinician, and that might be a senior paramedic or it might be an advanced paramedic. And then that will escalate. So, we've had complex cases where certainly I've been telephone call at 2 a.m. It's escalated through advanced paramedics through to me, and then my next phone call was the trust medical director, and I think his next phone call was the trust solicitor, because the complexity of that decision was huge. So that remote advice is really important. But the big thing about that remote advice isn't about the person that calls. It's about, one, the people that don't ever, and is there some risk there? And also, why don't they feel like they can ring? Are they worried about it? Do they think they're okay and they don't never ever need advice? But also, it's about how many times is someone ringing? So is someone so nervous that they're ringing up on every single incident? And also, do they know when to ring? So they might ring up for one thing, but on another occasion, they may not ring up. So that remote advice is there. That's not the challenge. That's easy. That's a desk and a phone. The challenge is making sure that people are ringing up for the right reasons at the right time. There's some virtual stuff, and again, pictures, but as you can tell by this, the lack of sound on this thing, that technology is not my favourite place, and I am not on Facebook, and I've always vowed never to go on it. But I did go on Twitter, and I went on Twitter because when I was an advanced paramedic, I started looking after central Manchester, and the workforce there is quite young. And when they came back into Meal, they all immediately went on their phones. They were all talking to each other via Twitter and Facebook and things. And so I said, well, for me to be around and leading them, actually, I need to get on this stuff. And that's why I am a tweeter for NWAS, because I pushed and pushed that they should have access. People should have access to us, to me, via social media. Really important. It is important that we're accessible, but it's important that we're constant. And when I say constant, that does not mean in any way, shape or form that we should be going to every scene. In fact, if we get clinical leadership right, there'll be a requirement in 5 years to have less clinical leaders and less attendances at scene. And that's because we've got it right, because all those other things are in place. So people know when to ring up, they know what their scope is, they know when they can go a little bit outside of it, and they know when to stop and ring a friend. That accessibility and constant supervision and leadership means that they don't need the leadership as much anymore. The leadership can start to really look towards directional stuff within the organisation, because the staff themselves understand where the limits are and when they can get some help. And the big thing, and I've said it over and over again, but it is very important to me, is about this inspirational, empowering leadership. So making sure that someone looks not just up, but out, around, down, and sees inspirational leadership, but also feels empowered to make some change within the organisation. Because frankly, 3,500 999 calls a day in Greater Manchester. I can't be inspirational for every single one of those people that are looking after those patients. So we really do have to make sure that we are empowering our staff. And this is the big thing for me. And I've actually had a conversation in a meeting about this today. This is about celebrating. So we have a pretty rubbish job some days, and it's not pleasant, and we see some pretty horrific stuff, and we have to talk to parents, patients, or families of patients who have been through some pretty horrific stuff. And we get bogged down often, and I think this is a criticism of myself, but probably a lot of my colleagues, we get bogged down in what went wrong and trying to manage the what went wrong. So one of the things that I am really pushing with my team, and I think it's something that is lacking in a lot of places but really needs to happen, is that we spend some part of our day celebrating something, because there is goodness in all of these people that you can see on this screen. They've done something really good. You know, guys there that have done 40 years service for the ambulance service, 40 years. That needs real celebration. So we make sure that we are celebrating something, because I strongly believe that actually our staff are our biggest asset, and our, you know, the next me is out there somewhere, the next advanced paramedic is out there somewhere, but without being celebrated for what they do well. You know, I'm very sure that 99% of what our staff do is spot on, is very good, but we don't celebrate that. We concentrate far too much on the negatives. So a big thing that I'm really trying to push, and we really all need to push, is that good practice also needs to be shared. So when we get these bulletins that say an incident's happened and we've got to do this from now on, we should also say, and this incident happened and it was really good and we should all do this. You know, that is how we inspire some change. That's how we lead. So I think, yeah, so I have put some links at the end of that presentation, so, and some reading if you want any. The video we will try and make available. I'll try and get Andrew to do that. I guess, Andrew, we go back to you now to see if there's anything, any questions from me, France.
Thanks very much indeed, Dan. We have lots of questions, such as, has Dan gone to watch MasterChef?
Clearly a Twitter follower from today's conversation.
Bless them, bless them. Okay, so we have got some questions. In fact, we've got lots and lots of questions. I'm going to have to sift through them. Let me have a look. There's a few questions from key members of staff, Dan, who said, will you please hurry up because I'm on the verge of getting a job. Okay, we have a question from Frank. Frank says, do you have any tips for balancing work life?
So I don't know. I do. I think we all do this a different way, don't we? Our personal resilience is really important. And we talk a lot. I think it's really good, really good that recently we've had an awful lot of stuff about our own mental health. And it really is now something that we talk about a lot. And I think that's a good thing. It has to be a good thing. And clearly, I've landed on those pictures, but clearly going to the gym is not one of my resilience things. But it is important that we do that. So I'm very clear that I keep my work and private life exceptionally separate. In fact, I don't think until I started to do some very high-level media work recently that my other half really knew what I did for a living, because it is important that things are separate. And there are times when work comes into personal life. There has to be, but there has to be time when the phone goes off as well. There has to be time where you allow yourself to really switch off from work. There's time when you have to talk about work. And I think the biggest thing for me is prioritization of workload. It will encroach onto your work more, or onto your personal life, more, if you don't prioritize your workload. Do that plate spinning that I talked about at the start. Practice that, get that right, and the balance will come, because actually there are times when you have to drop a plate. And I used this analogy with some of my managers recently, saying the plate's dropped, I'm sorry, it will have to stay smashed, because there are times when we do have to cut out something within the workplace to, and it's that prioritization. So I always prioritize staff first, alongside patients, obviously, but staff come first. So if I've got to give out a commendation, that comes top of my priority list. And then something else will come next. And at the bottom of the list, maybe I drop something for the day or for the week or for the month. And if anyone could see my to-do list, there are things that have been on there for almost a year now, because they're nice to-dos, but they're not essential for what I need to get done.
That's a good answer, I think, Andy. That's something that I try to hold that to. It's important to have that very clear divide. We have a question from Kieran. Other than drinking lots of coffee, Dan, how do you stay motivated in your role as a consultant paramedic?
I think I know which Kieran this might be. I think I love my job. That's the first thing to say. So, I do genuinely love my job, and there are things that I don't like about it. There are times when as Kieran will have seen just recently, I suspect, there are times when I get back to my office and I sort of sit down and take a big deep breath and think, that's been a difficult day, or it's been a hard day, or sometimes just a uninspiring day, and they're difficult days as well, aren't they? If something's boring or not really what you want to discuss. I think what motivates me is when I see stuff developing and going well. So little things like I've had a meeting today. Probably 60% of that meeting was okay. Some of it was absolutely nothing to do with me, and I didn't need to be in the room at that particular time. But one of it was about some volunteering stuff that we're looking at within the organisation. Really, really important area of our work, something we need to get a lot better at, using volunteers and inspiring and getting volunteers right. But it actually linked to a piece of work that I did back in 2008 on frequent callers. And just hearing some of the development around the frequent caller work today makes me think, gosh, I started that ball rolling back in 2008. Now I'm nothing to do with frequent callers anymore, and the success of that is about that team. But actually, I started that ball rolling. So little things like that can make you think, gosh, I made that difference that day.
Excellent. We have a question from Rob. Rob said, what one thing did you wish you'd have known before you became a consultant paramedic?
Oh, I don't know. I think I probably entered this role with my eyes fairly wide open in terms of I'm fortunate enough that I've always worked in the Greater Manchester area, and I remained in area. That's the first thing. I think I understood what the role was about. And I think probably that's perhaps a better question for when I did the change from, at the time, assistant operations manager into the advanced paramedic role. Now, that was a big change. It was a really exciting time because it was a brand new role led by, Mike Jackson, Andy Swinburne, and Kevin Matway-Jones, but it was a brand new role and we could develop it. But gosh, that was a learning curve in terms of all of a sudden these new managers were around and everybody wanted a piece of you. So actually learning to say no, which might sound a bit strange because you can't see my face, but learning to say no is a key thing that I haven't quite got right yet. And learning to say, actually, no, I can't do that for you this week or whatever, is a really important lesson. But I think I entered this role probably with my eyes pretty wide open as to what the role was going to be. And in effect, all I'm doing is leading a different team now.
Excellent. We have a question from Jonathan. Jonathan asks, how do you manage difficult conversations?
I'm assuming this is in the context of leadership. I think this is a really, really interesting question to me. And I think what is a difficult conversation? So we come from a profession where obviously we have to have very difficult conversations with people sometimes the worst conversation they could possibly ever imagine having. So we do have to sometimes in leadership, especially in the role that we do within clinical leadership and within NWAS or within the ambulance service, just think about, actually, is this really that difficult a conversation? So if you are maybe telling someone that they're underperforming, or maybe you are having a conversation that they're not going to enjoy because it is around a disciplinary, that type of stuff. We learn our trade as paramedics, telling, really distressed people that their loved ones have died. So I think the first thing to do is not to be afraid of the conversation, because you have had worse. You have dealt with worse. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I'd like to think that if you're in a good shape in terms of your leadership and in terms of your team, that this is not the first conversation you've had. So you shouldn't be having the first conversation being a bad one. Your first conversation should be a celebratory one, and you should be constantly reinforcing good practice and constantly having decent conversations and saying hello. And so then when it does come to the little bit awkward, or actually we are going to have quite a serious conversation now, that shouldn't be as bad, because all the way through over the last year, 10 years, however long it may be, you've been having really good conversations with that person. I think it's more of a challenge when you when you don't know each other, and when you very rarely speak to somebody, and or you've never seen them before, and then you're having to have that fairly challenging conversation. But then I would question why you are having that conversation if you don't know the person. So I think it is important that we understand, in the context of difficult conversations, that actually, if you are having a difficult conversation today, you probably haven't done the groundwork over the last 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years.
Great answer. We have a question from Andrew. Any ideas on celebrating good practice? For example, hospital outcome feedback for staff, or complex presentations and appropriate referral feedback?
Yeah, so I don't know who's on, so I'm hoping no one's on for information governance, otherwise they might shout at me. But yeah, so we are challenged. So we're challenged in a number of ways on this, but the biggest one is about information governance. Do we have the right to that information? There are some schemes, again, the power of Twitter. We've been talking to someone in Wales around the scheme that they've been doing. But what we've been looking at recently, and if it hasn't started, it will be doing very soon, is a collaboration with the Trauma Network in terms of a request for information about trauma. So you take a trauma patient in, you ask for that information, and they will send you some information out. Now, I do have some concerns about it, and I've raised those concerns with the guys that are looking at it, and it's something we need to think about. So if I put a slip of paper, let's say stroke now, so I put a slip of paper in, if I've brought Dan Smith in, he's had a stroke, I think he's had a stroke, and then I get a slip of paper back saying this wasn't a stroke, it was a mimic because of. And then I take the same presentation in again a couple of months later, and I do it again, and I get a slip of paper, and this time it's a little less informative, and it just says this was a mimic, this wasn't a stroke. And then I do it again in a couple of weeks' time. Eventually, what I'll do is I'll change my practice in a negative way, because actually we've got to accept that we're going to see stroke mimics. We need to cut them down, but we've got to accept that we're going to see them. What I don't want is a patient getting a poor deal because feedback hasn't been given properly. So we need to understand that relationship, because what I don't want at all is patient care going down because of our need for feedback. Conversely, sometimes the feedback's not very pleasant, and it might be, I'm very sorry to say this patient's died. I want to know about that feedback, not me personally, but the leaders need to know about that feedback, because that might really upset the staff members. So if I put a slip of paper in and the slip of paper comes back saying, yes, you were right, they were very badly injured, they died, that might really upset me. And we need to be able to make sure that support's in place. So that was a very long answer to say, yes, absolutely, we need to get our feedback better. I think there's two ways of doing it. There is the personal feedback, as I've just described, but done in a safe and supportive way. And there is also a bit about general feedback. So when we get a funny case, or an unusual case is probably a better way to say it, an unusual case or a complex case, actually, instead of just one paramedic learning about it, we share that, and we have a depository of complex cases that we can share in an anonymized way, where we can all learn. Of course, again, the challenge there as a leader is who's looking at that. Is it just our engaged workforce that's looking at that? And have I got 20 paramedics or 30 paramedics or whoever, or one, who's never ever going to look at that because they don't want to learn in that way? So yes, we are doing it. Yes, we will get better at it. But I think we really need to think about how we make it very, very good, rather than just getting a little bit of feedback going to one person, a couple of lines from a doctor somewhere.
Excellent. Okay, lots of questions coming in now, Dan. We might have to cut some of these off and forward to you by email. However, question from Jack. Is there a collaboration between ambulance services to ensure consistent clinical leadership nationwide? If not, how can we how can this be improved?
Very good question. So the first thing, there isn't the consistency in terms of the model. I think we have to be cautious in terms of trying to say one size fits all. What is working for us potentially in the Northwest might not work for West Midlands, might not work for London or Wales or wherever. I think what we should be doing is sharing what is good. And I think actually probably if I'm going to criticise NWAS, I will criticise us for that. So we don't celebrate what we've done well often enough in terms of the organisation. So sharing some of our learning, and maybe ambulance services that are more new onto the journey of clinical leadership, sharing some of the challenges that we've had and sharing some of the mistakes that we've made, because we have made some. The College of Paramedics does have a consultant paramedic group. I've been very poor. I think we've had 3 meetings, and 2 of them I was away for, and one I couldn't make, which was this week. But we are starting to share again a little bit of the best practice across the consultant paramedic group within the College of Paramedics. And NASMED, and Ambulance Service Medical Directors Group, also has a subgroup of lead paramedics. So there is a sharing of best practice. I think we have to be cautious in saying that everything will work everywhere. And certainly even within NWAS, there's got to be some acknowledgement that I work in a very different area to Cumbria, a very different area. And so the challenge that I have here, they may not have, but they will have their own. And actually, does one size fit all for every area? And I think no. And we need to make sure that's right. But we do need to share what's good about some of the clinical leadership.
Great. We have a question from Creona, and they ask, do you consider it important to get a promotion at work for growth and to get motivation?
Sorry, I didn't hear the first part. Just say that question again, Andrew.
Yes, sorry. Do you consider it important to get a promotion at work for growth and to get motivation?
I would say not a promotion. I think the term promotion tends to mean moving up. I think new challenge, definitely. So, in terms of, and this is a personal thing as well, isn't it? I've got a friend who, works on an ambulance, joined the ambulance service at the same time as me, works on an ambulance, has no intention, still loves her job, and has no intention really of moving. Because they enjoy the role, they really keep themselves up to date, they're motivated every day to come into work for the patients and for the person that they work with, and that is enough for them. For me, I don't think I didn't join the ambulance service with aspirations of becoming, they didn't have consultant paramedics, but I certainly didn't join thinking I want to be at the top of the tree. I joined the ambulance service because I love patients, and I still love seeing patients. So I'm really clear that I'm really, really clear that I want to maintain clinical practice within any role that I do. I have to really start to consider if promotion is where I go next, because actually I might lose some of that. So I have to really consider now, I won't be looking for promotion probably. I would be looking for sideways if I was looking again, because it's fresh challenge, I think, that motivates somebody. It's an interesting debate at the moment. We've obviously had the pay review, which has led to some really genuine concerns within the sort of junior management team in terms of their pay and how that influences their thinking and work. But we do know from studies and from research that actually when push comes to shove, the money is fairly low down in the motivator. Fresh challenge, good leadership, good team, good work are really high up there. So I don't necessarily say promotion is important, but I would say a fresh challenge, being empowered and feeling like you're able to make a difference. That, for me, is a big motivation for a lot of staff.
Okay, just last couple of questions. A quick question from Craig. Is there any leadership courses within NWAS that perhaps you would recommend, Dan?
Yeah, I think it depends where you've come from and where you've been. So I wouldn't necessarily go down a load of leadership courses with you now. There are lots and lots and lots of leadership options out there, not just internal to NWAS, but external. So I've engaged recently with an external provider in terms of some leadership stuff, and this is where the business thing came in, because I knew I needed to get a grip of that a little bit. So what I would say is, if anyone is certainly within NWAS is looking for the next step and feels like they need to look towards leadership and developing some of their leadership skills, one, they are more than welcome to contact me. But what I would say is, your first protocol is speak to the person who is leading you, but also speak to people around them who does lead you. So if you're not inspired by the leader above you, then look around and talk to somebody. And the best course for you is designed about where your development needs are. So you may already be a very good leader. So actually leadership isn't what you need, but you do need a bit of knowledge about change management or about the NHS or even finance. So sit down with somebody, get yourself a mentor. We're doing some talent management stuff at the moment in NWAS, where we're testing on each other some talent management conversations, and that's around understanding need and understanding development, and then tailor what your development is for you. And if anybody wants to talk to me about their own sort of personal stuff, we are more than happy. Always more than happy, because I do need to find the next me. So, I'm always more than happy to chat to people about where their development needs are.
Excellent. And the last question, we have got lots of questions, Dan, and I will promise I will forward you all the questions, so hopefully you can answer them, because some of them are quite specific to our ambulance service. But the last one from Carlos: do you have any regular meetings with the rest of your colleagues to talk about new implementations or advances in ambulance service?
So I have lots of meetings, probably too many, a lot of my colleagues would say. So yes, so internally, so within Greater Manchester, what we have is called a quality business group. So I have a full day every 5 weeks with the advanced paramedic team. Some of that is about their own personal development. So we might go through some complex cases. We might go through some CPD stuff. We might go through some remote advice that they've given, or we might have a chat about what we want to do over the next 12 months, where we want to change some practice or whatever. And then that meeting, that's the morning, and then in the afternoon, we have a meeting with the wider senior management team for Greater Manchester, including the head of service, where we talk about quality improvement within the area. That's replicated across the trust, so we have a regional one of those as well that me and the head of service go to, and that looks at the regional footprint, and we look at risk and things. And then we have the clinical leadership board. Now, what I will say about the leadership board, and this is really important to think about both within NWAS but within other organisations, is we're quite happy to listen to anyone's idea. It just needs to come to that group, really come to that group with some real laid out. So ask me a question about whether we can suture tomorrow, and I will give you the answer, or show me the reasons why, and I might consider it. But if you come to us with a real clear plan, sometimes they're really obvious, some of this stuff, and it's just passed us by because we're not close enough. The thing around innovation is that innovation can't always come from the senior leaders. Where innovation will absolutely come from is the staff themselves. What I don't like to hear of is staff being dismissed. And again, that's about time sometimes. It's about leadership style and management style. So the reality is what we should be doing is allowing that function to come up from the staff, say, we think this is a good idea. And sometimes it will be a no. And that's about managing that conversation. But what I'd like to see is more stuff coming through. I got challenged by one of the APs probably about 18 months ago. He told me it was all right for you as an AP. You were one of the first ones. You could just do what you liked and made a load of change in practice. And I kind of thought about that. But, well, yes, it probably was a little bit easier for us, but it doesn't mean that APs or SPs or road staff or urgent care members of staff can't change practice now. They can't influence change. What we've got to do is get the structure right to make sure that they're able to feed that up to the right people that might say, yes, that's a very good idea, let's do it.
Perfect. Thank you very much indeed, Dan. We have had lots of questions there. They have all missed MasterChef now, or Master Bake, or whatever it was called. So, for those people who missed the beginning of the webinar, do not worry. We have got an entire recording that we will perfectly edit, and it will be almost like the dream presentation to you, with no gaps at the beginning where I nearly ended up singing, Dan. There was people from our trust requesting that
I could hear you. You just couldn't hear me. You were doing very well.
I know. I'm going to tick off that module for able to respond very quickly to gaps in presentations. But thank you very much, Dan. It's been really, really informative. And as I said, I will make sure that the recording's perfectly edited and that all the bits and bats are done. But it's been really inspirational. Again, as an NWAS employee myself, lots of key points there for me to take away and learn from. A copy of the video recording and a certificate of attendance will be dropped directly into your CPD record for those people who are members of CPDme. But more importantly, for those people who aren't, you will also get a copy of the recording accessible to you so that you can share it with colleagues and friends. Again, as I chatted before, we are running all the CPD certification for the Emergency Services Show. It's a fantastic show. As I said, there is over 63 certified learning and development opportunities this year. And so please register and get yourself down there. It's a great 2 days. I do know that North West Ambulance Service have also got a stand there, and so you can jump between the two and you can compare who's got the best pens and chocolates, perhaps. All that leaves me to say is I've got the team in the background, which I think are going to start to unlock their microphones. We've got Sarah Harris, who's been managing our social media. So thank you very much, Sarah, for managing our Twitter page this evening. Thank you to Dominic, who's in the background, who started the presentation off. Are you there, Sarah?
I am, yes, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And Dominic, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
It's almost a bit like Telly Bingo, isn't it? And most importantly, I would like to have a big thank you to Dan Smith. So are you still there, Dan?
I am. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much indeed for joining us tonight, Dan. And again, thank you very much for everybody else who's taken part in this webinar on this Wednesday evening. And all that's left to say is have a good night and take care of yourself. Thank you and good night.